Hello, my name is Brandon Ballengée. I'm an artist, biologist, and environmental activist. As an artist, I make visual art that deals with themes of biodiversity and loss of biodiversity, the Anthropocene, and where we find ourselves at today environmentally. As a scientist, I'm very interested in studying ecosystems and organisms that are declining, and especially amphibians and some fishes, and trying to see how the science inspires the art. And then as an activist, I'm very interested in this idea of activating communities about local ecology and ecosystems and nature. So trying to engage people. Something that maybe I started around 15 years ago, and I really become interested in exploring the idea of kind of performative art, ecological art, and citizen science and participatory science, in the way that, you know, when you're taking people out and even not, you're performing science, and the way that somehow you could make this at a community level. And so for here in Zaragoza, I've been very interested to try to look at amphibian deformities. This is something that has been found in other parts of Western Europe, as well as Asia and Europe and Australia and North America and South America. But so far, there's been no evidence that deformities in amphibians, particularly anurans, the frogs and toads, is occurring here. But it's very unlikely that it is not occurring, but it's very difficult to find them. And it's hard to find the resources to find them. But it's also very important to study things like this, because amphibians all over the world are disappearing very, very quickly. Somewhere between 1/3 and 43% are some of the estimates for declines and disappearances. So again, we study the developmental deformity because often the deformities are so severe that it would kill the animal. So here in Zaragoza, I thought it was very important that we try to at least do these pilot surveys. And through the eco-action, we try to collect amphibians and look at them and see what they tell us about the health of their ecosystems. And then likewise, it's a good way to try to get local people inspired and a little bit more educated and experiencing their local environment. And hopefully through that initial experience and knowing more about these animals, it will hopefully make them, encourage them to try to conserve them and fight to make sure that there's still habitats for these animals as well as us. Why I'm really interested in amphibians, because during my lifetime, we've lost probably 1/3 to 43%. So, like, not just as an artist or a scientist, but just as a human being alive at this moment in history, I'm very shocked by this. And when I first started becoming interested in amphibian issues in the late 1980s, early 90s, the thinking was, well, maybe we've lost 10% or 15% or 20%. And each time there's a new study, we see that we're losing more and more very rapidly. So for terrestrial animals that live on land that have backbones, they're a very special group that are very ancient. They've been here since way before the dinosaurs. And now something that we as human beings are doing is making them disappear very quickly. And this is very important, not only because I think they have a right to exist and they're very special, but they're also very, very strong and resilient. They've been here for millions and millions of years. So it means that a habitat that cannot support them and an earth that cannot support amphibians most likely cannot support many other life forms, including our own. We're actually probably much more fragile than amphibians. And I think it's important we start to reflect on this and realize that we're not destroying the environment for other species, we're destroying the environment for ourselves to be able to survive on the earth. Yes, I became, after we did the initial sampling in the river, I became really interested in the volume of non-native species we were finding to native. I would say when we started to collect, we would find 95% non-native introduced species compared to the 5% native species. So we know all over the planet, when you introduce one species one place, that it did not adapt and evolve over millions of years or thousands of years, it can have a real impact. Sometimes the non-native just dies and goes away. Other times it, such as here in the Rio Ebra, it will adapt and change and become naturalized, meaning that it starts to breed and then have a population. And then that can displace, or actually in the case of some of the species here, eat some of the native wildlife. So what you see is that's happening all over the planet. When you go to the Seine River in Paris, when you go to the River Thames in London, when you go to the Hudson River, it's very similar to the same species we're going to find here. So as we've become more globalized, we're becoming more homogenized, not only in terms of culture, but in terms of ecosystems and in terms of biodiversity. And we realize all over the world where biodiversity is doing this, right? It's shrinking, shrinking, shrinking. But many species are adapting. Some are becoming much more tolerant to the ecosystems that we've then altered. So with the eco-displacement, I find it really interesting to go to a landscape, to go to an aquatic ecosystem, find a piece of that landscape and the species and the found objects, and bring this back for a little while, displace it inside of the museum context. Normally the eco-displacement is made out of an acrylic vitrine that is made to house important cultural artifacts, such as little sculptures or artworks or historic artifacts made by humans. I like to reverse this idea so that we question value. So we take the species from nature and we take the landscape of nature that we've changed, we bring it in, and then it starts to have this question of what is valuable? Where do we place our value system? Do we like the idea that we're storing objects of culture for the, forever? Or maybe we should also be concerned about what we're doing to ecosystems and what the life is. I also think in a strange way there's a positive message, because it shows just how resilient life is. Organisms, biodiversity, it wants to persist. We just have to let it, and in some cases encourage it, and in other cases really just clean up what we've screwed up, clean up after ourselves, and life will come back.